on Gang Violence and Youth Development will now come to order. We'll begin by taking up the items in the order that they appear on the agenda, beginning with item number 1.
Item number 1, resolution, Cardenas Parks, relative to including in the city's 2007-08 state legislative program support for Proposition 5, the Nonviolent Offender Rehabilitation Act and related matters. This item has also been referred to the Rules and Government Committee.
Okay, thank you. We have public comment cards on this item. We'll begin by taking public comment. I'll call the first two people up, Dennis O'Sullivan and also James Adamson. Yes, please.
Morning, Councilman, members of the committee. I'm here in support of your resolution. I know that your years in the state, you passed a lot of legislation trying to get help for children in schools and our youth that are being funneled into the juvenile justice system, which is just a training ground for the state prison system. And we believe that there's enough money and enough services involved in Proposition 5 that the kids will finally get the money and the services that they need and keep the families together and keep the community whole. And I know that's always been a mainstay of yours, so it didn't surprise me at all when I saw that you authored, this resolution. And I'm just here to say that I support it fully, and anything I can do to help you get it passed, I will.
Thank you. Next, we have James Adamson.
Good morning. I'm here to say I support Proposition 5 because I have abused drugs for a significant amount of my life.
Can you put the microphone a little closer to you?
I have abused drugs, and I support this proposition because if I had the opportunity to have these resources when I was younger, maybe I could have avoided the point of going to being incarcerated. And we do need recovery, and I do wish this proposition to be passed. Thank you.
So, in your testimony, did you say that you used drugs or at one time were addicted to drugs or something like that?
Yes, I have been.
You have been?
I'm in recovery right now, and
when you're in recovery, are you just like reading books at home or something? Are you in a program?
I'm in a program.
How did you come across that program?
My father told me about it, and I was happy to take that opportunity because I needed it. I needed recovery.
So you didn't get sent there by some courts. You and your family realized that you needed help, and
no, I volunteered to take this program.
You volunteered to take the program. And what is it? Can you give me some of the basics of what that program consists of when it comes to your life?
It gives me the resources and all the information I need to stay sober. It gives me all the tools that I need to keep myself going. It gives me things that I need to know to keep the everyday life simple. And to know that I can't be looking at my future, it's about today. And this is the type of program that I need to stay sober.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes, if you don't have to answer these questions. You're not in court or what have you, but you volunteered to speak here today. So I want to understand a little bit more about how the issue of drugs is affecting you and what you're able to do about it. Okay. So you don't have to answer every question that I ask you. If you choose not to, I respect that, okay? But I just want to understand more about what you're going through, because to me, what you're going through reflects what tens of thousands of people are going through on any given day in the state of California, and thousands of people here in the city of Los Angeles. So when it comes to your habit or addiction that you had, was it an addiction that actually drained monetary resources from you?
What do you mean by monetary resources?
Yeah, I mean, was it something that was free or something you had to figure out ways to?
I had to figure out ways to get the money to get it. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what led. I've been in prison. And if I would have had these resources before, as a child, to know, that this is not the life that I need.
So your drug addiction led to certain activity of yours that resulted in you getting arrested and put in prison?
Yes, it has.
Okay, can you give me an example of what happened that one thing led to another, and then you got handcuffed and then went in front of a judge and then they put you in prison?
Well, the time that I was arrested, I was under the influence of alcohol, and I had got in a fight with a FedEx driver, and
So you got into a fight with somebody and the cop showed up and then, you know.
I got arrested and I took
Okay, you got arrested for battery or something like that, or they charged you with
misdemeanor assault.
misdemeanor assault. And then you went in front of a judge and then you ended up behind bars for a day or a month or,
I ended up behind bars for 7 months. And I ended
oh, you went behind bars for 7 months?
no, I actually got 2.5. I got 2 years with half.
How long?
2 years with half-time sentence.
Wow. And those guys on Wall Street probably won't even do 1 month.
Yeah.
Wow.
For
That's amazing.
yeah.
So, okay, so they charged you and the judge hit his gavel and said, take
No,
this
it
guy to
took-
jail for
it-
2 years or what?
It took me 7 months in court, and there was more charges, but it came down to grand theft and assault.
Okay.
It began with 211, and it got down
But at the time of the incident, you were under the influence of a substance.
alcohol and marijuana.
All right. But you don't make excuses that you were or were not under the influence of the substance, right? You accept that?
Yeah, I accept that.
Yeah, that's a fact.
That's a fact.
So you didn't try to act like, well, I didn't do anything, or what am I doing
No, I
here? You know,
understood.
I didn't do anything wrong.
I understood that I played my part, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have been in that situation.
Okay. So you spent 7 months behind bars as a
A year.
juvenile, or
No, this was last year. I spent a year and a month and 7 months in Wayside.
oh, that's
2
a
months
jail,
in,
not a
2
prison.
months in.
State prison.
No, I spent 6 more months in state prison.
Okay, so 7 and 6,
13 months altogether.
13 months. So in the state of California, the average prisoner, and you look average to me, no offense, we expend $45,000, $50,000 on a prisoner. So the state of California spent about $50,000 plus to keep you behind bars for a total of 13 months. Mr. Sullivan, are you familiar with the program that this young man is in?
He's in People in Progress, sir.
Okay, about what's the average cost or expenditure to put a young man like him through your program for a year?
$17,000.
$17,000. Did you get any? Did they try to rehabilitate you on the issue that contributed to you going behind bars when you were behind bars?
The only rehabilitation I had took was I was taking a GED class, and while I was in there, I tried to get into AA and NA, and by the time I actually got accepted to go to the class, it was the day after I got released.
No. Speak clearly into the mic. I want this on the record. So you were trying to take GED.
I was in a GED class, and I had signed up for AA
You mean
and
GED, like high school equivalent
yes,
or something
yes.
like that? Okay.
I was in that. I was in there for like a good 5 months. Besides that, I had signed up for Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous the month that I got there, and I didn't receive that letter saying that I was approved to go to those classes till the day I was released. The day after I was released was my first class, so I never got the rehabilitation in there.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, does rehabilitation take place in your program?
Yes, it does. And one of the things that we know that's been very beneficial through the years right now, there's a program in the state of California called SASCA, Substance Abuse Service Coordinating Agencies, but that's what the program became known as. And those people who are allowed to participate in a recovery program while they're in the prison system, and that raises the costs. It goes beyond the $44,000 a year. It brings the cost up to over $50,000 a year while they're in those programs. And when they come out of those programs and they come to the community-based organizations to reenter society, and they have that follow-up where they have counseling, they have job skills training, they have people that are supporting them coming back into their reentry. The recidivism rate that the state normally has of approximately 85% drops down to approximately 28%, which is a drastic difference.
Definitely.
So we know that the community-based organizations play a strong role in helping the people in the community reintegrate into the community as useful members of society. And if we can do this as we did with Proposition 36, where we intervene on them so that they don't go into the prison system to start with, and they get the appropriate treatment. Proposition 36, because it was put through very quickly, only a small percentage of the people who went into the courts and were adjudicated Proposition 36 treatment received the level of treatment that they needed. Others were given much less of intensity on services, and they failed because the services didn't match the need. Proposition 5, we feel, addresses that. They learned from the mistakes they made on Proposition 36, and they will match the people that are coming out of the court with appropriate services. Now, instead of the person going into the prison system where they lose their homes, lose their jobs, lose their families, the families wind up on welfare, they're going to be able to stay in the community, have the support of their family, maybe be able to retain their homes, maybe be able to retain their families and their jobs. It's very beneficial to do it this way, we feel, and it's very cost effective.
Okay. So, Proposition 5, you seem to describe that Proposition 5 is somewhat of cleanup legislation or a cleanup proposition on 36. It's fixing some of the things or tightening up some of the things that perhaps should have been in Proposition 36 to make sure that its success rate was actually appropriate.
Yeah, we have the data from UCLA and some of the other studies that have been done to show us where the mistakes were made in Proposition 36. And I know that those people that at the county level that are involved in providing services are already drafting guidelines for how this will be implemented because they feel this will be passed. And they know from the Proposition 36, they were forced by the state. We went up to it was passed in October of 2000. We went up to Sacramento in November of 2000. It was an implementation committee was put together. The counties then had to figure out what plans they were going to use, and they were locked into the plan for the whole 5 years that the original Prop 36 was funded for. They had to live by that, and they couldn't modify it as they found out that there were errors in the planning.
Okay. And as far as you can tell, there are some people who work for county governments in California who are in support of Proposition 5?
Most of them are, because it comes under the realm of health and public health and mental health, and they know that putting people into services is much better than putting them into prison.
So people who are engaged on a daily basis on the public health model of addressing this issue seem to be vastly in support. But when it comes to people who are involved in the suppression model in the state of California and even at county levels of government, they seem to be in opposition, such as sheriff's departments, probation departments, et cetera.
And certain judges, yes.
And certain judges.
Because it affects their industry.
Okay, all right. Thank you both very, very much. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and we wish you well. Next, we have Peter Repovich.
Thank you very much, committee. I appreciate the time. The Los Angeles Police Protective League has always been actively involved in providing protection to the citizens of Los Angeles. We are now asking you to join with us in providing that same level of protection by opposing Prop 5. The initiative is deceptive. It contains a loophole allowing defendants accused of crimes to effectively escape prosecution. In fact, the measure shortens parole for drug dealers from 3 years to just 6 months, and it could allow those charged with domestic violence, child abuse, identity theft, and vehicular manslaughter to escape prosecution altogether. The measure is strongly opposed by Chief William Bratton, District Attorney Steve Cooley, the California League of Cities, California State Association of Counties, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, MAD, the Los Angeles Times, and countless others, because it establishes new bureaucracies, reduces accountability, and can dramatically increase local costs and taxes. Prop 5 is poorly drafted, deeply flawed, and fiscally irresponsible. It takes up to $1 billion annually out of the state's general fund to fund a massive new bureaucracy and mandate controversial drug treatment programs for criminal offenders that provides no accountability and little likelihood for success in rehabilitation. drug treatment and rehabilitation advocates and experts, community leaders, civil rights organizations, crime victims groups, drug prevention organizations, and California's leading law enforcement associations also oppose Prop 5 because it will exacerbate the ongoing fiscal crisis for state and local governments and inevitably lead to the cutbacks for existing vital services.
Continue.
This long and complicated initiative is widely unrealistic in how it is written and will impose massive new burdens on local governments and local public safety services. Incredibly, the initiative will cost $150 million in January from just signed state law budget, money that has been budgeted and will blow a bigger hole in our budget deficit. Startup costs for Prop 5 alone in 2009 are at least $600 million. Most significantly, Prop 5 will lead to more drug abuse and more crime. California citizens and their state and local governments simply cannot afford Prop 5. Prop 5 will waste billions, but even worse, it will waste lives. We need to find effective ways to lower drug use and addiction among our youth. But this initiative does the exact opposite. We urge you, the Los Angeles City Council, to join the law enforcement and Mothers Against Drunk Drivers in opposing Prop 5. Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Last thing I would like to say is that and it's not in this document, council member, but the threshold of 80% for the legislature to have to be able to impose any changes in this legislation, if it does pass, is unconscionable. Not even the normal threshold for taxes is 2/3, but for this, it's protected with 80%. So I think that's another area that's striking in this legislation.
Well, there you have it. That's the initiative process in California.
Thank you.
Legislation by initiative, not by the legislature. Okay. Anything else?
That's it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Next, we have Margaret Dooley Samuli? Samuli.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for putting this motion forward and for hearing from us today. My name is Margaret Dooley Samuli. I'm with the Yes on 5 campaign and the Drug Policy Alliance Network, a sponsor of the measure. Prop 5 is at least 8 years in the making. Prop 36 passed...
How many years?
8 years. Prop
I thought
30...
you said 78. I'm like, wow.
Long time. Prop 36 passed in 2000. The treatment instead of incarceration law passed in 2000 with 61% of the vote. Since then, polls show that 74% of Californians support treatment instead of incarceration. It was a very good start. There are 84,000 graduates. The state has saved nearly $2 billion, and UCLA researchers have seen no increase in crime. So this is a proven better approach on all fronts. But it doesn't go far enough, and as has already been said here, there are parts of that program that need to be tightened up, and that's what Prop 5 does. Prop 5 builds on the success of Prop 36, but also builds on the recommendations made by experts in the areas of prison reform and treatment access for decades. And all of those reports, as you know, Council Member, are stacked up on our legislators and our governor's desks. They're there. Everyone knows what needs to happen, but it just hasn't been able to happen in Sacramento. The law enforcement lobby is very powerful and really shoots down a lot of important reforms that have been tried, and that's what's happening with the Prop 5 campaign today. On the Yes on 5, we have the League of Women Voters, the California Nurses Association, California Society for Addiction Medicine, the California Council, the California chapter of NAACP, the National Council of La Raza, on and on and on, California Consumer Federation. It's a wide, broad coalition of groups who recognize that we need system-wide reform of the way that the state intervenes in the lives of people with drug problems. And Prop 5 is going to change the system from how we intervene with young people so that we direct them towards drug treatment and rehabilitation and a positive future as opposed to the road to lifelong incarceration. It's going to address protecting families, keeping families together by providing treatment in the community when possible and safe for nonviolent offenders with drug problems. But it also acknowledges that we don't give up on people who are behind bars, and it mandates rehabilitation for those folks as well, so that we can break in all of these places, we can break the addiction, the cycle of addiction and crime.
When it comes to someone who's addicted to a substance and unfortunately they engage in a crime or what have you, and they end up in the courts and prosecuted and end up behind bars or what have you. In a situation like that, how does incarceration help prevent future incidences of that individual?
Well, we need to think about what the purpose of...
I mean, obviously, if the person is out the streets for 13 months or something like
Right.
that, he's probably not going to get into a brawl at a bar, probably not
Right.
going to end up, fighting with somebody, on the streets or what have you, because the person is confined to that particular institution
Right.
and isn't going to interact with your average person on the street. But eventually they get out, and when they get out, what happened behind bars when it comes to a treatment process that actually decreases that person's chances of a reoccurring incident?
We incarcerate too many people in the state of California. Our prisons are so overcrowded, there's
I
virtually
know-
no
I get-
space for
hold on.
rehabilitation.
I get that. Okay, but that wasn't my question. My question is, let me ask it differently. The people that you're saying support this proposition, you named off quite a few people who are involved in the healthcare model of society.
Okay.
How much of that healthcare model is happening moderately or aggressively with people who are addicted to substance when they're behind bars? Very little?
Very
Almost
little.
None? A lot? What?
85% of, these are the prison administrator's own numbers, 85% of people behind bars in California have a substance abuse problem.
Okay.
Fewer than 5%, even on paper, receive any treatment. But the young man here was probably one of those people on paper who was supposed to be receiving services.
So they probably chalked him up of having
Yes.
been involved in AA,
Yes, probably.
even though he got the letter the day he left or the day after.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, let me,
Yes,
if I may. First, I want to thank you for your advocacy. But I find myself in a precarious place. I represent a district that has a history of very high crime, a history of immense density. I think we're at 70,000 people per square mile now. When I started with the district 17 years ago, it was 30,000. The city average is 6,000. And so the ability to maintain our communities at a level where kids can actually walk to school without fear of being shot or being harassed by a drug dealer or even a prostitute for a period of time, we had no way of taking care of that child. Today we have a way of doing that because we have cleaner streets, we have less of that type of presence in a good part of my district. But just a few months ago, I've had a sheriff shot to death. I've had a grandfather shot to death near a grammar school. So the intensity of the violence is still there. I'm being told by the sheriff, Police Protective League just made their statement, and I've been told by parents, what's it going to take to have a safer street? When I look at this proposition, and I haven't studied it enough, but I want to get it from you, what do I tell those parents? What do I tell those kids who've lost their father or mother to a shooting, that person is in treatment. They're still involved in drugs, they're still involved in transactions, they're still behaving in a way in which they're trying to get to their, whatever it is they're addicted to. And the violence that comes from that is very real. And I can't do anything about it because he's being treated or she's being treated. I mean, I'm trying to understand what are the real life consequences in the neighborhoods I represent, and I just want to get your perspective on it.
Right. And I think there are two important things about that, about Prop 5. One is that nothing in Prop 5 stops offenders from being held accountable. No violent offender gets diverted to treatment instead of incarceration under Prop 5. And nonviolent offenders who have drug problems only get diverted if a judge says they should. That is, the whole litany of nonviolent offenses that are not drug offenses, the whole litany of nonviolent offenses, there's no automatic diversion whatsoever. It's judicial discretion. The opponents like to skip over that part, but the fact is that the judge would decide. Now, for treatment, for nonviolent drug offenders, simple possession, right, not with intent, and paraphernalia, those folks, if they fit the criteria, the eligibility criteria, they will be diverted. But for this group of people who are nonviolent offenders, they have drug problems, it's up to the judge. The judge is the gatekeeper, period.
The judge
Okay,
can still put them in jail?
Absolutely. They can say, no diversion for you, we don't think you belong in the community, you need to be behind bars.
Okay, but let me play this out a little bit more.
Sure.
The drugs that the non-violent offender is getting are getting to our neighborhoods illegally.
Yes.
And so by allowing folks to continue to fall, because when you go through addictions, you get to a place, as it's been quoted, as a point of clarity, but by that time, they need to hit rock bottom. There is a journey that occurs as they go through that downward spiral. And in that journey, there's a lot of drug transactions, there's a lot of subcultural, economic conditions that exist. We have drug trade and drug transactions. Are we going to be indirectly allowing for that as well as they go through that downward spiral?
No, absolutely not. Any violation of probation when a person is on treatment instead of incarceration, they can be removed from the program immediately by the judge. And that's whether they're in the program for a drug offense or some other nonviolent offense. Diversion into treatment instead of incarceration is court-supervised treatment. That is, people's behavior is being monitored constantly by the treatment provider and by the court and by a probation officer. And it's important to note that people don't stop using drugs because they go to jail, because they go to prison. Our prisons are awash with drugs. In fact, there are people who pick up drug possession cases behind bars. So we're not able to keep people away. You don't remove drugs from the environment. You help people build the capacity, like these people have, to resist. And that's how you stop their engagement in the drug.
I'm
drugs.
very much convinced that the prisons are the farm club for gangs. That, to me, is clear, and they do get addicted there. I understand that. My concern is, do we have the facilities, the infrastructure to actually send folks to diversion? My understanding, it costs money to get treatment, and then people with money get treatment. And I don't see those facilities. I don't see them being allowed to be built in our neighborhoods.
We have some history with this. When Prop 36 passed, it doubled the amount of funding for drug treatment in the state. And some very similar concerns at the time, this is going to overwhelm our treatment system. And indeed, there were growing pains, but what we saw was an immediate 66% increase in the number of licensed facilities in the state and a 130% increase in capacity. Our prison system is big because we spend on it. Our treatment system can be equally big if we invest in it.
When you said that it was doubled to what figure?
Dollar amount. $240 million.
$240 million in 1 year for treatment in California?
Yes.
But today, we're spending $10 billion of state funds on incarceration in California. That's a fact.
Just the prison part, not even the
Because
jail.
when I was the budget chairman 7-8 years ago, the prison budget in California was $5 billion, and it has now doubled. Arnold Schwarzenegger 2 Mondays ago just signed the budget, and it was $10 billion in this budget that he just signed. But we're only spending about $240 million on rehabilitation.
Well, that's what we were spending in 2000. It's less now.
Oh, it's even less.
It was cut again this year in the
But
budget.
the prison budget has been growing, and yours is going down?
Yes. And Prop 36 was the first increase in spending on alcohol and drug treatment in 20 years. Prop 5 would be the second. That's why it's on the ballot. Because it doesn't, this budget is not protected in Sacramento, even though we know from Prop 36 that every dollar we spend on diversion, we save $2.50. And those aren't fuzzy quality of life dollars. Those are hard, real budget dollars. It's a UCLA calculation.
That doesn't even include incidental costs. That's just the direct, quantifiable, $1 to $2.50.
Absolutely, and that does not include savings on child protective services that aren't used, welfare, and it doesn't calculate increased tax paid.
Do you see the neighborhoods allowing facilities like this to be built in their backyard?
That's something we need to, that's a fight we need to have. And with the resources, programs will get it done. We know that because they did in 2000.
Well, regardless, it's gone up in capacity by 130%.
Right.
Even if it's difficult to put a new facility up, for every 100 people that they served before, they are now serving 230? Is that what you're talking about? Or what's the number?
I think it would be another, I think
Now,
that's
if it
right.
gone up 30%, then it would
If
be
it went up,
another
you're
30
right, you're right.
people.
If
But
it went up
130%,
130%, then it would be
that's
another 130
people
yeah.
more for every 100 that were,
Right.
okay? I'm not great at math, but I think I understand that one.
I wasn't prepared with that equation, I'm sorry.
But I am a firm believer in intervention. I really think human beings should have a chance to live. You know, and I grew up in Cypress Park and Lincoln Heights. You know, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but the bottom line is, on my street, on my hands, I can tell how many of my friends died because of drug addiction. Some of my friends who, at 16, thought, I am a veterano because I'm going to go to life for prison because that's what's going to happen to me. And that's a very fatalistic point of view on how to look at oneself, but that is a very real point of view that exists. And that's something that we need to change in a very direct way. But I also know, chairing land use and management for 7 years in this city, what the voter base does not want. And these facilities are the hardest thing to put anywhere in the city. And if you look at the way the city's been built out, where they're concentrated, we've allowed as a society for certain neighborhoods to perish and be penalized more than others. And that's happened the past 50, 60 years. So I need to study this more because I understand the harshness of this country when so many Latinos and African Americans are in prison. We have the highest prison population in the free world in this world. And we don't seem to want to change that, given the posture of our voter base. And then you look at who votes, and that's a whole other question. But the bottom line for me is we need to understand more of the impacts of this, and I need to study this more. But it's a very, I think, critical step, and it raises the dialogue to another level that we need to have this discussion in public.
And I would just add to that treatment centers are places where people are sober, where they are building positive lives. It's not a blight on a community, but that's something that needs to be communicated, and it's a challenge. But it's part of removing the stigma of addiction and recovery.
Believe me, I was in the discussions as a staff person when Phoenix House was being built out in the valley, and the ugliness that happened there in the early 90s when Councilman Aragón was councilman back then, not the latest version, but that to me was very clear as to what we're up against. And that was in 1993, 94. That weighs heavy on me in terms of what do we do if people are not given the ability to become healthy because the facilities don't exist. And that's where I'm having some problems.
Yeah, I think we have two choices. We can either build more prisons or we can build more rehabilitation centers.
I agree with you.
Hey, how about if we did both? Would you settle for every increase in dollars for law enforcement and prisons, we match that dollar for rehabilitation? Would you go for that? Say yes.
Well, that would certainly be better than our deal now.
If we went for that in the year 2000, when I was the budget chairman, that means that we would be giving just to prisons, forget about law enforcement. I'm talking about prison guards and that system, not the street officers. If we agreed to that in the year 2000, then what would we have is we would have $5 billion and $120 million on top of that, over $5 billion going to treatment, and still $10 billion going to incarceration. So that's not based on the way society is and the way us politicians are, and we're afraid to be looking soft on crime and stuff like that, I think that's a great deal, aside from this proposition. Actually, that would be 10 times better funding than this proposition.
That sounds like a very good deal.
Better funding, or 50 times better funding than this proposition. So actually, this proposition is nowhere near as aggressive when it comes to funding as, for example, the state of California's aggressiveness when it comes to committing state dollars to incarcerating people.
That's right.
Right.
But it also returns a lot, the investment pays off a lot better when you invest in treatment and rehabilitation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have some more cards. Thomas Rojas.
How's everybody doing today?
How you doing?
Thank you for having me. My name is Thomas Rojas, and I'm for yes on Proposition 5.
Do you have 2 minutes to say whatever you want,
Well,
relevant to this issue?
Okay, okay. Well, basically, I want to say I just got out of jail, and I was supposed to go to prison for 2 years, and they wanted to send me to prison, but I had asked for some type of program because I've been arrested, I've been in jail probably about 6 years of my life, in and out of jail.
6 years of your life?
Yeah, 6
How
years
old
of
are
my
you?
I'm 29 right now. So I've been in jail numerous times. Every time I've been to jail, I get sentenced, I go to jail, and I've always had an addiction. My addiction is crystal meth and opiates, painkillers. So, I mean, I know if I had some structure to help me. Right now I'm in People in Progress, a program in treatment right now, and that's given me everything that I need. It's just opened my eyes to everything. I mean, I lost my wife, my house, my car, everything that I own. And People in Progress, I could say, has given me a new life, a new way of thinking, just the way I see everything today. And I know with more programs, that'd be greatly adamant to people with addiction, because when I was locked up in jail, almost everybody had some type of addiction, whether it be marijuana, heroin, cocaine. They were doing something. And I know if there was some type of help that we could offer as an alternative besides going to prison and jail, I think it'd be a lot better for today.
Now that you're in this program, do you feel a better sense of dignity today than you had when you were in jail?
Oh, of course. I mean,
I don't want to assume.
I'm living right. I mean, I feel better. I have respect for myself.
Well, wait a minute. What did being in jail do for you when it came to you identifying with yourself who you wanted to be versus where you were at? Did it do anything for you in a positive way?
I'm gonna tell you, me being incarcerated in jail, it really didn't do nothing for me. All it did was, in a positive sense, it made me look at everybody else I was in there with people that were doing 25 to life or 3 years, 5 years. It didn't matter, but you know what? It opened my eyes to see I don't want to live like this anymore, but at that time I was supposed to be going to prison, and I had asked him if I could get a program because nothing has been working. I'm coming in and out of jail, prison, and I have no type of help. Every time I get out, I go in a cycle. Every time I get out, I always go to my drug connection. okay, or anybody that's
Related-
in the little circle.
Anybody who could help you with your habit.
Exactly.
Help you satisfy your habit.
Exactly.
So you were in a cycle.
In a cycle the whole time.
Okay. So did the prison do anything to break that cycle of prison activity, being arrested, being prosecuted, back to jail? Did prison do anything to actually break that cycle?
Prison did nothing. I had.
But wait a minute, you did say that prison did allow you to look to your left and to your right and see the people you were in there with and realize that you guys had a lot in common, such as bad habits,
Of
right?
course.
But did prison do anything for you to help you understand how to break your habits?
No, there was.
This program you're in, is it doing anything to help you break your habits?
It's doing everything for me.
Okay, and if you are successful in this program, Mr. Sullivan, have there been people who have been successfully sober after being in your program? Okay, so if you happen to be one of those individuals who ends up being successful in breaking your own cycle of your drug addiction habits, then do you see yourself doing anything else with your life that would cause you to go to jail?
No, it's
Okay.
always
so,
been.
in other words, you're not in the habit of sticking a gun in somebody's face and robbing a liquor store or taking their wallet just because. Usually, your criminal activity was related to, please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm getting the sense that your criminal activity was related to one of two things. One, satisfying your habit financially, or being under the influence of those drugs and then doing dumb things while you're under the influence that cause you to get arrested, prosecuted, and back in jail.
That's correct.
Okay. So, were you contributing to society when you were in jail? Or were you basically using up society's resources?
Using up society's resources. I mean, I had got nothing positive out of jail.
Okay, but what I'm saying is they housed you, they clothed you, they fed you, etc., and you didn't have to pull money out of your pocket. Taxpayers were paying for that, right?
Of course.
Okay, now, if you no longer go to jail, are you going to be asking the government to take care of you, or are you going to be looking forward to taking care of yourself, getting your job back, getting your life back, taking care of yourself, paying your own bills instead of the government paying your bills?
I'm going to be taking care of myself because, again, I'm going to say it's kind of weird, but me being sober and being in this program, I want to be independent. It's making me independent. It's making me grow, and my standards are so much higher. I mean, when I was in my addiction, I was doing nothing but committing crimes to get money for my drugs, or either going to rob one of my drug connections and get the money for it, or get the dope for it. And I stooped down to low standards. I mean, that Thomas was a whole different Thomas. I didn't even know who that person was. But really being in this program for me, it's helped me substantially.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question because I think some people listening to it probably think that you're talking to some bleeding heart politician and you're a bleeding heart individual, and I don't agree with that view. Do you take responsibility for what your life was while you were addicted?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Are you trying to make any excuses for what happened previously in your life?
No.
Are you blaming it on other people, or do
No.
you take responsibility for yourself?
No, I'm taking full responsibility for my actions as of today, because before I was lost, and today I'm clean and sober and I'm focused.
Wonderful. Well, one thing I want to make clear, I wouldn't insult you by trying to make excuses for you. I appreciate the fact that you came forward and gave your testimony today, and you gave your opinion, which is your constitutional right in this country to give your opinion. I appreciate that, and I value it very, very much.
You're welcome.
Okay? So thank you so much for what you're doing. We wish you the best. I'll pray for you. It looks like you're on the right track. It looks like you're not making excuses. It looks like you've looked in the mirror and you realize who you were, you realize who you are, and you realize who you can be. So congratulations. Any questions?
Yeah, just one. As you're leaving prison and you're experiencing what you're going through today, and if you were to look back at the folks that were around you in prison, if you were to pick 10 of them, how many of those 10 do you think would come to a place where you're at, given what they're going through?
If they were given a chance to come to a program, to want to change their lives, I think all of them would. Out of those 10, I mean, they would. I had so many guys when I was locked up in jail or prison, they were trying to get programs. And they were admitting to themselves that they had a problem. Because every time they would do something, commit a crime, they'd always mention some kind of drug, dope, whatever it was.
You know, there's, and I don't mean to insult you or those who go through that experience, but I've been told by the guys that come out when I'm in the neighborhood, and he would tell me, look, Ed, don't let them BS you. There's a convict mentality. They're trying to tell you what you want to hear. They want to tell you what it is that they think you want to hear so they can get by. So they can do what they want to do and get the upper hand just so they can get away with it. How do you feel about that?
I'd have to put myself, honestly, if they were trying to get away from something, I don't think you can, you know, because the courts, I mean, we have the whole judicial system, but as far, I'd have to put myself in those shoes.
Right.
To get out of a certain situation, I don't see that happening at all.
Right. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but this is what I deal with when I'm in the street. And these are the same folks who are doing the things I know what they're doing, but in my face, they give me one facade. But as soon as you turn your back, someone stole that car. Someone broke into that house. Someone shot that gun. And when you ask who it was, no one wants to say who, but we know who it is. And that's our dilemma. So that's why I wrestle with this, because I don't know if we have enough facilities and support systems to deal with the 10 that you spoke of. And that's what I'm wrestling with right now. But thank you so much. Thank you for stepping up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Barbara Spill. I do apologize, Barbara. We've been giving people more than the 2-minute allotted time, but we do have 2 items on the agenda, and we're going to give you 2 minutes, and if you go a little bit more, that's fine, but I don't know if we're going to let anybody talk for 10 minutes anymore.
Okay.
Sorry.
Good
Go ahead.
morning. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I will have 20 years this month
What do you mean by long-term recovery?
from addiction.
You
I
were
have not
you were
had a
personally addicted over 20 years ago?
Heroin and methadone. I started at the age of 13. And what I want to say is I'm so glad we're talking about it. When I was growing up, nobody was talking about it. I ended up in youth authority at the age of 15. The only thing that I learned was about drugs that I hadn't used. I'm one of those people that was a non-violent offender, but never got any help. I went into treatment in 1988. I knew on the crime before the last one, which was the driving under the influence, that I didn't want to go to jail anymore. When I got out, I called a treatment center. I was not able to get in. The only thing I knew how to do was use. I continued to use. I picked up another case. I got out. I used again until I could get in. And I needed to learn the tools. When you're in jail or a prison, you don't learn. You don't learn the basic needs, how to stay clean on a daily basis. When I woke up in the morning, it was all about how am I going to get the money to get my drug? How am I going to get to the methadone clinic? Everything was surrounded by that. I was unemployable. I was a burden on the county, the city. I had no health insurance. I had nothing. Today I work, I pay my taxes, I have insurance, I'm a good neighbor, I'm a good friend, I'm a good family member. It's much different. And I couldn't have done it without treatment. And Prop 5 will allow people, hopefully, like the person coming up behind me, to get it when they're 18 or 17 and not have to wait until they were 37. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Hillary Galperson?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Hillary Alperson, and I'm in here in support of Prop 5. I, like Barbara was saying, am also a person in long-term recovery. I have about a year and a half. I was a crystal meth and heroin addict by the age of 15, and then by the age of 16, I was addicted to heroin. I could pretty much touch on every issue that this proposition represents, but my main one today is the one on adolescents and seeking treatment for them. It was very hard for me. My main reason for actually being approved to go to treatment and finding treatment was because my father works in the treatment and recovery field, and he had the referrals in order to get me into it. And I was sent to an adult facility with 40 beds, only 2 of which were able to be funded for youth. And in turn, I was in a bedroom by myself because I was a minor and I couldn't be in a bedroom with an adult. And I did it willingly. And I know a lot of adolescents these days, they don't want treatment. You know, they're still stuck in their addictions and they're having fun and things like that. But like I said, I was a heroin addict by the time I was 16 years old, and I was strung out and I was tired and I was sick and I just wanted to get better. And 18 months later, that's exactly what I am. You know, I'm proud of myself and I love my life, and my family loves me again and they care about me. But furthermore, other than the whole adolescent part, just people in general. And I was in treatment when the whole Prop 36 thing changed from 6 months to 9 months, residential and things like that. And I saw a drastic change in, like, major drop in percentage of how it worked. Because I believe 90 days is when you actually start opening your eyes and it starts actually working for you, even when you're there against your will. Because in my addictions, I was actually like, I hung out in East LA with gang members, you know, and it was in El Sedano actually, and it was, I was scared at first, and it was kind of strange because I was like, I don't know what I'm saying, but it's basically what I'm trying to say is they're good people. They're addicted to drugs. Most drug addicts that I know, they're good people. They're just doing really, really bad things. And if we give them a chance to get better, then they might be able to get better with treatment instead of incarceration. That's all I'm trying to say today.
I'd like to ask you a question. I have no idea how you're going to answer this, but if somebody who's on drugs actually breaks a car window, hot wires it, goes joyriding, ends up running into a pole, and the cops turn the corner and they see the person, they find out that the car is stolen, etc. Do you think that person should go to jail?
Well, I believe that, like I've seen you touch on that, the fact that people shouldn't use their addictions as an excuse or as a leeway out of why they're doing certain things. But sometimes it's not necessarily an excuse, but it's you're under the influence. You can't really control what you do most of the time, you know, and you need to keep doing it or else you get sick, and it's a disease, it's a phenomenon of craving all these things.
Now, hold on a second.
But
my specific question has to do with the incident, not
itself?
with the person as a whole, how they got there.
Okay.
If the person engages in that incident, like I just described, they steal a vehicle, grand theft, they joyride in it or what have you, they end up crashing the vehicle, they get caught in the act, they get handcuffed, etc. It's verified that they did steal the vehicle, etc. Should that person go to jail for the grand theft part?
For the crime itself, perhaps. But when it goes to long-term incarceration, maybe the law enforcement system should look at the actual addiction itself and maybe go into treatment instead of long-term incarceration.
Well, forget about law enforcement looking at the addiction. How about society looking at the addiction issue as well? Do you think society should look at the addiction? They're going to look at the grand theft part. But aside from that, should they look at the addiction as well?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. I'd like somebody to come forward and please clarify either they agree with this statement or don't agree with this statement. At least help me understand what Mr. Repovich said. And Mr. Repovich, you're welcome to come and clarify if you'd like. You said there's a loophole. and I wrote down escape prosecution. Where in Proposition 5 is the language? Can somebody read the language in Prop 5, or if somebody understands, if it's a rhetorical statement, if somebody understands what they think that the opposition is getting at when they say that there's a loophole where people will escape prosecution?
I think I can answer that with it's a misinterpretation, a misrepresentation of what Prop 5 would allow. Prop 5 allows diversion for nonviolent drug offenders, as I said, according to fairly universal criteria. If you're eligible, you're eligible. There is an allowance for judicial discretion because we recognize that nonviolent offenders with drug problems don't always get arrested for drug possession, but they may show up in court again and again and again. Prop 5 gives judges the option, unties their hands, allows them to decide that if the judge determines that the nonviolent offense was motivated by addiction and that treatment for that individual would be in the best interest of public safety, that judge can decide to give that nonviolent offender with the drug problem treatment instead of incarceration. That judge could also immediately remove that person from treatment instead of incarceration at any moment. What has been suggested is that it's up to the defendant, that all a defendant has to say is, I'm addicted, and then somehow there's no way for a judge to hold them accountable. And that's ludicrous. That's the loophole that he's trying to describe, and that simply does not exist.
So basically, Proposition 5 still allows judicial discretion?
It's absolute judicial discretion.
Does Proposition 5 in any way, in any portion of it, give the defendant the opportunity to determine the outcome when
No.
before a judge?
No.
I don't know of any proposition or any law that has ever allowed any defendant to do that. And Proposition 5 is not the first one to do that. Or are they doing that at all?
The defendant
Allowing the
does not.
defendant to determine their outcome or what is going to be the fate imposed upon them.
Not at all.
When they go to court.
The determination comes from the defense attorney and the prosecutor and the judge looking at that person's criminal history, their current offense, and what's in the best interest of public safety. The defendant can certainly speak to what they would like, but they have no say over their disposition.
So the defendant has no authority in the court. Obviously, they have involvement in the process, but they have no authority.
They do not determine the disposition. That is the judge's decision.
Okay. All right. Anybody else like to clarify that? Question that I have? Yes, Mr. Repovich.
Councilmember, I'm not an expert in this field.
Neither am I.
Right off the bat, I'll just tell you that. But I think what happens is there are criteria that are set for judges on purpose. In other words, minimum offenses and things like that the public comes up with in order to protect the public good. So although a judge may have discretion, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's in the best public good in all instances. So when you open up the system for a lot of discretion like that, it could become a problem. The other thing that I would say is that there's nothing wrong with treatment or helping people that need help, but when it comes to essentially relating the crime to whether they're using drugs or not, I think that's a problem, and could become an even larger problem with a lot of discretion. Throughout the years, I think we've tightened up the legal system in order to protect the public by making minimum sentencing requirements on certain crimes and that type of thing to make sure that somebody who thinks maybe somebody should be let go has his own guidelines he has to follow, and that includes judges.
Now, can you clarify for me what you just described? Does that discretion, does it involve violent offenders or nonviolent offenders?
It's my understanding that somebody who's involved in a manslaughter situation, the judge would have that discretion. Yes. I think that's a problem.
Can you clarify if you, by your interpretation, if it's a manslaughter case that the judge, that this discretion matter would?
I don't believe that
Why?
that person would be eligible.
But no. What do you mean you don't think so? Is manslaughter considered a violent or nonviolent act?
In this, no, it's not. It's not considered nonviolent for purposes of this statute.
Wait a minute. Does this proposition try to redefine what nonviolent and violent is?
There is a definition of nonviolent offense in the statute, and that's what is being referred to here. However, there are portions of the statute that refer directly to that statute definition elsewhere in the statute of nonviolent offense. However, in the instance of judicial discretion that we are discussing, the term nonviolent is not linked to a statute. The judge has the authority to determine from his or her perspective that this is or isn't a violent offense. I don't see. I think I'm not sure why we're having this conversation. I mean, I trust judges.
No, the reason why we're having this conversation is because
that I was misstating the point. What I'm saying is, of course, it's the judge is not going to decide that manslaughter is nonviolent. I think that's a ludicrous misrepresentation. I can read from the statute exactly what it says about judicial discretion in this case, if you would like.
Go ahead.
Okay. So in what we're talking about, drug court style diversion of a nonviolent offender, but it's not a nonviolent drug offense. The court must find that placement of the defendant in Track 3 treatment diversion pursuant to this subdivision is in the furtherance of justice. In the case of a defendant who has committed a nonviolent offense, that is a nonviolent drug possession offense, that is not a nonviolent drug possession offense, the court may require the defendant to provide restitution, participate in a restorative justice program, and/or complete a portion of a sentence for the offense prior to placement in treatment diversion, with the remainder of the sentence suspended during participation. So you see, the judge has a lot of options about what to do, the goal clearly being breaking the cycle of nonviolent crime and addiction.
That discretion I have a problem with. I mean, to be able to say to a family that just lost somebody in a manslaughter case that the judge has the discretion, and to reduce a sentence that has guidelines now, to mess with those guidelines, I think, is a problem. Like I said, I think treatment is good. People who have drug problems, society should somehow figure out a way to give people treatment. But that's not what we're talking about here. You're talking about undermining the criminal justice system to give way more discretion that's necessary, and I don't think it necessarily works. It will cost society a lot more grief.
And I want to be very
Mr. Rebovich, hold on, Mr. Rebovich, you're stating before this committee that judicial discretion, limited judicial discretion is better than broad judicial discretion?
Yes, I do.
And how does that...
Based on the guidelines that we have set forth now. In talking to the district attorney's office, what he has said is that the guidelines that we have achieved over the years to make sure that certain crimes are punished by X amount of sentencing, whatever that is. And again, I'm not an expert and I don't know those numbers and figures. They work.
Mr. Rebovich, are you aware of how we got to where we're at when it comes to the discretion or lack of discretion that judges have today versus 50 years ago, for example?
No.
Well, we got there because mostly, sometimes by initiative in California, but mostly by elected officials being driven by politics, believing that they have to vote for those kinds of things because if they don't, they're going to be attacked as being weak on crime. And I tell you that because I was one of those state legislators myself. And in retrospect, I realized my weaknesses in going along with that mindset of the legislative body. And the fact of the matter is, now that I'm more educated and more understanding of the broad responsibilities that all of us have, I regret the fact that politicians throughout the country, by and large, vote in fear rather than vote by understanding what the true statute is that they're voting for or against. And as a result of that, we have become a society where judges really, in most cases, aren't truly judges. They're administrators. Because in some cases, their discretion is so narrow, or it's been taken away from them, you might as well have a computer spit out the sentence. Because it's automatic. And to me, that's not justice. Matter of fact, that's not even consistent with what we as Americans claim we're all about. Because I have never heard an American ever say that they do not believe in latitude, that they don't believe that this is a country of second chances, that they don't believe that we are about allowing people an opportunity to regain their life back. And yet, when we take the discretion away, chip it away little by little by little by little, every year, then we are becoming less than what we claim we are as an American society every day by taking, in this example, by taking the discretion away from the judges. A police officer is not a judge. A politician is not a judge. Someone who's administering a rehabilitation program is not a judge. The prosecutor is not the judge. The defense attorney is not the judge. The victim is not the judge. The perpetrator is not the judge. There's only one judge. And if you take that judge's discretion away, then really we don't have any judge. We have a society that's automatic and that lacks the flexibility that this country claims it's all about. And I understand your example about, how do we look in the eyes of a family whose somebody was run over by a vehicle and the person was under the influence of alcohol or drugs or what have you. How do we look at them when they say, well, the judge didn't put them behind bars? Okay, with all due respect, Mr. Repovich, that's an emotional example. That is not a judicial example. That is not an example based on whether or not the case, in fact, merits X result.
I think the public mandates that. I think the public, and that's, what it's going to come down to in this particular case is where the voters go.
So what you're saying is the public decides, so therefore this proposition being on the ballot is actually a good thing, because they're either going to err on the side that you're on, which says vote no, or err on the other side by majority, either way, vote yes. So what you're saying is, at least those people who chose to participate, they were right by voting yes, or they were right by voting no, or are you saying that if it does pass, then they were wrong?
Well, everybody's going to have their own point of view as to what side they take.
No, but you said
the initiative process is okay. I mean, that's what...
You said either society requires it or mandates it. One of those two terms you used right now.
Well, I think in the end game, they do it by whether their legislatures vote to put a particular law in or change it, or the initiative process. Some are more efficient than the other. Some people take advantage of the initiative process because not a lot of people are paying attention to the details. Obviously, in the end game, the voters will have their will and their say, and that's okay. But it's also okay and important to provide different points of view. And I understand, Councilman, how you got to where you are and why you feel the way you feel, and I appreciate that, and I think that's open and honest, and I think that's good to be that way. I just do differ with how you analyze it. I mean, I think to have, watching throughout the years the criminal justice process change and evolve, it's not perfect, but to have ultimate discretion by one person is pretty powerful position. And I think, so coming up with what that discretion is real important. And I think when you relate drug use to crime, and you say it's okay to commit the crime, whether it's nonviolent or not, because they're under the influence of drugs, I think there's a huge cost to society.
Well, see, that's where I disagree fundamentally in how you're interpreting what you just said. The fact of the matter is, the judge is not there to only punish someone. The judge is there to try to create justice for society at the expense of the person that is being judged. And therefore, the judge is the one who has to decide what happened, happened. And I can punish, or I can rehabilitate, or I can remand to this, or both, or some combination thereof. See, that's where I disagree with you fundamentally, that the judge is not there just to punish. The judge is there.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you on that fact.
To decide what shall we do with this human being. Because if the judge doesn't have that kind of discretion, then let's just do this, Mr. Repovich. Let's just make it real simple, like they do in some countries. Well, we're pretty black and white. You do crime, you lose a hand, you lose your life. You don't commit a crime, don't worry about it. Just go about your business. You won't lose anything. That's pretty black and white. In this country, we have a lot of latitude for everybody. And that's, to me, what makes this country so great. Because on one day, somebody can go before a judge, and there's a judge in town. I don't know if he's still in business, but they call him, hang 'em high? I remember Mr. Dennis Zine said they call him Judge so-and-so, Mr. Hang 'em high, right? I think he's going to err on the side of punishment if he's going to live up to his reputation. And then you might have some other human beings who happen to be judges who say, you know what? I stayed up all night reading this thing. I spent time contemplating every word. And now that I have this person before me, and now that I've heard the prosecution, and now that I've heard the defense, and now that I've heard from the witness, and then maybe even give opportunity for some of the victims to speak or what have you, I'm going to render my decision. To me, the latter, rather than Mr. Hang 'em high, the latter is the beauty of what makes this country great. And one thing I want to say, because in the interest of time, I'm sure we'd love to go on forever, all of us, but in the interest of time, I want to thank you, Mr. Repovich, for coming forward. I want to make it clear to everybody here. I have a lot of respect for you. I appreciate, everything that you've said, and I hold no ill feelings toward you. You know that, but other people watching us dialogue like this might not realize that.
No, I get it.
Thank you very, very much.
And I appreciate your candor, Councilman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, did you have anything? Okay. I want to read something because I want people to understand from my perspective, having been the former budget chairman of the state legislature, and some people say, well, how can you be the former budget chairman of the state legislature? You belong to one house. There's no such thing as the budget chairman of the legislature. Let me clarify. Yes, I was. Every year, someone gets to be the joint legislative budget chairman, and I had that honor and that title. So my signature was the signature for the state budget of the entire legislative membership. So I was the chairman of the state assembly, but at the same time, I was given the responsibility of being the chairman of the process. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say I was the state budget chairman. According to the California Secretary of State, this proposition, if approved by voters, will allocate $460 million annually to improve and expand treatment programs for persons convicted of drug and other offenses. And it could be as much as $1 billion in state costs annually, attributable to expanding drug treatment and rehabilitation programs for offenders in state prisons, on parole, and in the community. I happen to be opposed to another initiative that's on the ballot, and one of my main points is it has no funding in it. So all it's going to do is increase the cost of the state budget, which means very likely they're going to take that money from various places because there's only so much money to go around. But I'm going to read this second statement. The state savings over time exceeds $1 billion a year due to reduced prison and parole operating costs. One-time state savings on capital costs for prison construction potentially exceeding $2.5 billion. Those two statements come from the State Legislative Analyst Office estimates. So one of the reasons why I do not oppose this, based on the fact that it has no new funding in it, yet it has expense requirements in it, is because the offset is real. And I happen to understand enough of the state of California budget to understand that that legislative analyst, their analysis is accurate. So at the end of the day, we're going to have more money put in the proper place, and we will not having the robbing of Peter to pay Paul as a result of the passage of this proposition. Is there anyone else who'd like to come before this committee on this item? Any other questions or comments, Mr. Reyes?
Just one, my dilemma is that I trust people on both sides of this issue, and I'm still learning what it means in terms of, like, this particular piece of information, Mr. Chair, is significant. And so I want to continue looking at this and doing more due diligence and speaking to both sides and make the proper vote when appropriate. But are we going to put this to a vote? Or?
Yeah, right now we will. Obviously, we're operating as a minority, so it'll be a recommendation of the chair regardless of what happens. Okay. Anything else? Okay. One more thing I want to clarify. It's interesting that I just got a call from another police officer who's a good friend of mine who I respect very much, and he gave me a 5-minute pitch on why I should oppose this. But one thing that he said, and I was hoping Mr. Reprovich would still be here. He might be the one that could answer this question. But the person told me just an hour and a half ago, that Connie Rice is opposed to Proposition 5. Does anybody know that to be fact? I'm just a little surprised because most of the time when I see her, she's talking about rehabilitation and she's for those kinds of things, et cetera. So it's kind of interesting that that person told me. I guess we'll ask Connie Rice directly. Mr. Repovich? Sir. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a former police officer. Right before the committee, coincidentally, he called me and was talking to me about Proposition 5. He told me something really interesting that I just kind of did a double take. He mentioned that Connie Rice officially is against Proposition 5. Do you know any fact? Do you know that?
Not.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
I talked to Connie Rice 10 minutes before I came up here on the telephone, and Connie was still studying the proposition.
Oh.
She hasn't made a commitment one way or the other about it, but she's pretty judicial about her approach to investigating this. So she hasn't made a decision.
Okay, and the reason why I ask is that, you know, I'm not going to make my decision based on what Connie Rice decides or what have you. That's her prerogative. But it was just kind of interesting that a police officer would tell me that Connie Rice was actually opposed to Proposition 5 when he's opposed to Proposition 5. And over the many years that Connie Rice has been involved with him and other folks, they usually weren't on the same page.
I just don't, in my conversation, what I extrapolated, and it's purely me extrapolating, was that she didn't feel necessarily it was the answer. Okay. I mean, Connie Rice, we've met with on a variety of matters in the city of LA, and we always sort of brainstorm to fix things, and I think she's stumped on this particular one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. So with that, we have no more public comment before this committee. Public comment is now closed on this item. So with that, I'll move that we approve this resolution. Do you agree with approval or?
I'll abstain at this time.
Okay, so it's a recommendation of the chair, based on the chair's vote to approve. We move this item forward as a recommendation of the chairman of the committee to approve the resolution. Okay, thank you. We now move to our second and only other item on the agenda, item number 2. Please read.
Item number 2, continued from September 11, 2008. Motion, Cardenas, Reyes, Smith, relative to instructing the Board of Public Works and Bureau of Contract Administration to provide a status report on the First Source hiring program and to include the ability of the BCA to implement the program with existing resources and the development of program rules and regulations and related matters.
I'm going to turn the questions over to Councilmember Ed Reyes on this item. I held the item over because I knew Mr. Reyes had some questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the staff for their tenacity and not giving up and pushing forward and making sure that we get some traction in this process.
I think those are a little too close to each other. Those two mics next to you at the end? Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Perhaps we just have the staff introduce themselves, and the questions I have really are about their progress. Back in October 2007, the council was established this particular policy, working with the Bureau of Contract Administration and with the support of the chair, and making sure we move this forward. And I appreciate his motion to get the status moving, get this process moving. So again, give us your name and just give us the status of rules and regulations and how we're doing.
Very good. Good morning, Council Member. John Reamer, the Director of the Bureau of Contract Administration. I have with me Mario Antillano. He's in our Bureau. He's the lead on this. And I also want to acknowledge in the audience Sandy Garcia and Hannah Choi, our contract compliance.
Can you raise your hand? Hello, thank you. I'll make sure that's you too. All right.
Oh, we get applause too.
These are the warriors.
Fantastic. We want to, first of all, begin by not only thanking staff, but thanking you for your leadership on this and your patience. As you stated, this was approved back in October of 2007 by Council with the directive for our Bureau, the Bureau of Contract Administration as a designated administrative agency, to begin the process of establishing rules and regulations. To recap just a little bit, this first source hiring ordinance is the city's desire to create an environment, if you will, so that on all of our city contracts, those dealing with personal services will provide an opportunity for those workforce development groups that the Community Development Department works with to have the first right of refusal to provide men and women that they have trained to work on our projects or these contracts. And what it allows is that that particular contractor that has been successful in the process will notify the city agency and give them an opportunity to present them a series of names so they can come and compete for whatever positions would be available. We've spent the last year attempting to, in light of the economic challenges that not just the city, but I dare say the state and the country are facing, put together rules and regulations to go along with this ordinance, so if you will, to establish the playing rules as to how we would do this. And I believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were here before this committee and we gave a preliminary report, and we're back today and pleased to do so to speak on new things that we've come across and to give you an update on how things have been going. Roughly, the rules and regulations are approximately 70% complete, and we're in that, using a football
You just say
terminology.
70%, right?
70% complete.
Okay.
We're in the red zone now.
Okay,
And the
good.
red zone is difficult to score, let me tell you.
Just don't fumble, all right?
Oh, let me tell you, boy. The first 80 yards was easy, but this last 20 is a challenge. But we're in the red zone now. This last 30%, what we found that we're dealing with is what would be the most effective and efficient way to administer this ordinance as the DAA. Not just for the city family, but also for those potential employees who would be working on these contracts. We've met with several of the players, specifically the Community Development Department and their representatives, and we've looked at some of our existing ordinances, specifically living wage as an example, and what we're doing with local hire on our construction projects. And what staff has determined is that we can go one of two routes. We can administer this manually, which will take some time, and we do not have the money nor the staff, or we can automate the process. And when we say the staff, mind you, we're not just referring to city staff, we're also referring to the staff that would be involved in developing these potential employees, the workforce development piece, bringing all of these community benefits organizations together, community-based, organizations together to fuel and fill this pipeline. We wanted to have something that was not going to be cumbersome and confusing, but something that would flow smoothly, no pun intended, with respect to the pipeline. So the two approaches would be manually versus automation. If we did it manually, as staff testified the last time we were here, we're looking at finishing the rules and regs within 6 months, but then we could not tell you how efficiently this process would work. We just do not know. We would need CDD to go and meet with their workforce development teams and put a plan together on how we would do this, if you will, horse and buggy, versus doing it with automation. Why we are inclined to, and forget the incline, we're very strongly suggesting and recommending we go that route, is because we've had dialogue with the proprietary departments, the Department of Water and Power, the Department of Airports, LA World Airports, the port. They also are examining this concept of first horse hire. And everyone is in agreement this should happen, this must happen. After sitting here and listening to this testimony over the past hour with respect to some of the challenges that we have in our society, I'm mindful of an acronym that we coined some time ago, which is LIGHT, Lifting Individuals, Giving Hope Today. This first source hire is one of those tools that provides hope for those who are trying to recover and restore their lives after they've been broken based on decisions that they made. And I didn't really hear anybody come up here and try to escape a bad decision. But what I did hear were individuals who are looking for environments and opportunities to recover from those decisions. So we don't want to just put a program out there, but we want a program that's going to work efficiently. The fact that the airport, the harbor, DWP see the same thing, the stars are lining up. What can we do now to bring everyone together? And it's clear to us technology is the key. So now how do we go forward with respect to technology? Well, there are two more roads that we have to consider. Either we do it ourselves in-house, or we purchase a package. We have someone bring us a ready-made system that we can implement. The airport is examining that very option right now. They're in the process of going through an RFP to consider potential suppliers of a program where they administer this in a automated environment and process their first source applicants. So these are the big issues that, quite frankly, we're going to need your leadership on. We've gone as far as we can go. Staff can finish the rules and regs, but do we do it manually as far as administering it, or do we do it with technology?
So given the process that seeks to be expedient and create efficiencies, that will generate the rules and regulations that allows all these different stakeholders within the city family to participate in this system.
We believe it will. And to step back just a little bit, as I was sharing with Mario, and he's the expert, he probably could speak to this, not probably, he could speak to this far better than I could. We can finish your rules and regs, but what we would be missing would be how we're going to administer this,
So
by hand or through the use of technology. So once that decision is made, we can get the rules and regs done 6 months' time.
Okay.
Now the hard part will come in administering this.
my gut feeling is that we lean towards technology, given that it continues to evolve, it continues to improve. If we can get into a system that gives us the most complete vehicle, if you will, that can absorb all these different processes, it seems to me that would be the direction. If we do it manually, we're talking about reasons why folks don't get involved, because it's too cumbersome, it's got to go to this meeting, and if you centralize and work from the same document or the same program, you can feed into it. I mean, that's something we're looking at the 12-2 process with the planning development process with building and safety, public works, on the land use side of how we operate the city. This, to me, is talking about how we look at our resources from the fiscal point of view and looking at efficiencies from that perspective. Do you have a recommendation?
The one word that I will continue to use is technology. Dream with me just for a minute. We have our three proprietaries that want to do this. We went back and we took a look at some of the things that's happening and the opportunities that we have. LAWA right now has a voluntary, LA World Airports, voluntary first source hire program. And over a 17-month period, just on a volunteer basis, they had 42 of their employers involved in this process, where they had 525 job opportunities. They had 1,500 referrals, 354 hires. This is just what LAWA on a voluntary basis. We obtained some information from the Controller's Office and the City Clerk with respect to contracts that we have inside of the City of LA, specifically the Council Control Departments, where the Controller's Office shared with us that for the fiscal year of 07-08, we expended $1.4 billion toward contracts. 38% of that went toward construction, and roughly 62%, which would be covered under this first source hire agreement, went toward those non-construction or those personal services, if you will, contracts, roughly $917 million. City Clerk's Office told us that in the same period of time, we executed roughly 919 contracts in the area of personal services contracts that would be over the $25,000 threshold that we would use with living wage.
Right.
So think about that, 919 contracts with opportunities, prime contractors, and as Mario reminded me of yesterday, that does not include subcontractors of these prime contractors that would be involved in this process as well. So given all of that, having a database that would allow us to process all of this information and communicate, if you will, not just within the departments under the council control, but the proprietary departments also. I mean, I'm hoping that they will see this as an attractive, not alternative, but complement to what they're doing as well and join with us.
Are we in a place where we could posture this, where we can have a demonstration project that allows us to work incrementally, that can be added on given the volume that you just described? Or are we at a place where we have to look at the big ticket item and absorb it all at once and kind of deal with all the growing pains that comes with a system that's that big? I mean, there's two different approaches here, and I've seen it work both ways. And when we do the big ticket item, and if someone blows a real significant piece of that infrastructure, I've seen it happen in public safety with some of our departments where, I mean, $8 million, $5 million, I mean, these millions of dollars are like, well, that was a tough lesson to learn, but now we got to start all over again.
No, I understand.
So I would hate to go down that road.
I don't want to join you down that road.
Right, so what I'm saying is, are you in a place where you have enough of a perspective as to what is the most strategic move?
The strategic move would be the route of the technology. We talked to our in-house staff, and they gave us a thumbnail sketch of roughly 18 months. That's based on the limited staff that we have and the limited resources. We wouldn't even begin to, at this moment right now, tell you what they would be. ITA, however, needs to be involved in this process.
Okay.
It's just mandatory. They must be involved, and we need to come together. We presented to the committee the last time, and I apologize that we don't have additional copies now, a flow chart that staff put together that outlines how this should work. And they have gone through and done a remarkable job in vetting all of the possible contingencies. So it's just a matter now of allowing our technology experts in this city to take a look at that and let us know what this will take.
When is that taking place?
We didn't want to go that route until we spoke with you. We needed to come here and let you know.
Well, Mr. Chair, being that you happen to be chair of another influential committee, could we perhaps suggest that in 30 or 60 days, working with ITA, have a rough sketch of what they think is needed?
Oh, most certainly. We can accomplish that within a day.
Within a day?
We can get that to them.
So what this committee will do, instruct you to work with the information technology department and put together a meeting so you can apprise them of what you're doing, so they can engage in giving their perspective on how to move forward from an ITA perspective.
Fantastic.
Okay. Now, that meeting will give us a clear insight as to what would be the most expedient step to take in trying to put something in place.
What I would like to do is, if the committee is saying we want to lean in the direction of not doing this manually,
Yes, I believe technology is the
doing
way.
this with technology, then we will also, in a parallel path, continue on with our rules and regs.
Okay.
Moving in the direction of finishing them, knowing we're going to use a technology-based, web-based approach.
Okay.
And so we're doing this in parallel because time is of the essence here.
Yeah.
Right.
Most certainly.
I think that's excellent.
We don't want to stop progress, but we
Yes.
certainly want to make sure that
Right.
that we can make this a process that is automated rather than manual.
Yes.
So wishful thinking has it that you'll meet tomorrow with ITA. Wishful thinking. And there is a systemized approach to the process. What is your time frame like from that point of view? I mean, what's the loop like? When do we get some feedback that,
Well, how about if we do this? Subsequent to this hearing, you contact the ITA department, and then you report back to us between 30 to 60 days on the progress with the involvement of the ITA department.
Most
and then by then, ITA will probably be able to give them at least some rough parameters of time and resources, et cetera, that would be needed to be dedicated to create such a system.
well, Mr. Chair, let's keep it tight. Let's do 30 days.
Oh, and...
A report back in 30 days on the progress with the
That's right.
interactions with ITA.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Most
Great.
certainly.
And I just wanted to share with you, Mr. Chair, that, back when we were moving on this, we had the set of hearings over in the valley when all the departments came forward. And we did have Daniel Fleming, President of LA Economic Roundtable. And the 06, 07, in terms of broad strokes, what they were looking at from, given our purchases of goods and services, West of LA, economic impact is $3.5 billion. And it was suggested that the realm of 34,000 jobs are relevant to that dollar figure. Imagine if we have that type of access for our local economy,
Most certainly.
because all that is bleeding outside.
Right.
So that's my sense of urgency, that if we keep bleeding, we have less jobs for the folks to give options and the issues that our chair is working on with the intervention dynamic. And so, again, thank you for your hard work. And anything we can do to push this along, let us know, because I'll hold meetings in my office if necessary. I'll ask my colleagues how we can move those respective committees and the commissioners if needed. I know the Deputy Mayor, Frank, has been really supportive, so thank you for your hard work. Is there anything else that we should be touching bases on?
No, you've given us direction this morning, and we certainly want to, once again, thank you very much for all of your support, your patience, and your leadership here. The direction has been clear. We will move forward now and contact ITA and share with them what we have, the ordinance itself, the flow chart that we have, and we have a 30-day window. I agree with you, time is of the essence, so we're going to try to move much faster than the 30 days and get some information back to you. So hopefully you'll hear from us sooner than later.
Well, in the last 30 yards, some folks would want you to do the student body right.
Yeah,
Others would want you to do a screen pass
I
with
know.
a strong block up front, but get it in there, all right?
yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so with that, we'll amend the motion to include that the CDD and Rex and Parks report relative to client tracking systems, ITA, Lawa Harbor, and BCA report regarding integrated implementation of FSHP. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I'm going to impose a little here. Could we do it in 2 weeks?
So report back on progress in 2 weeks.
Why don't we go for 2 weeks?
2 weeks? Okay.
All right, and then we'll hear a report back in this committee in 2 weeks. So what we'll do is we'll hold the motion in committee and then rehear it in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
2 weeks. Well, if you don't need me here, because city staff will be in Arrowhead for the emergency conference, but Mario can more than, yeah.
As long as you think that we have the adequate,
Yes.
okay, all right.
Okay,
got
well,
it.
thank
So
you.
2 weeks, okay.
Okay, well, you got the ball.
And also, as instructed, to work with ITA.
Thank
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Thank you for your support, sir.
All right, with that, we'll hold the item in committee for the report back in 2 weeks. In addition to that, we are going to go back to Anybody here on public comment on item number 2? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 2 is now closed. We will now go back for a technical matter on item number 1. With that, we need to clarify on item number 1, the votes recorded on that item. Our rules do not allow for anything other than a yes or no vote, or a no vote will be recorded on members who are not present. So if you prefer not to be recorded as a yes or a no, Mr. Reyes, I'll wait till you exit the room, and then I will open it up for a vote and then record the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will exit the room.
Okay, thank you. We're on item number 1, making a technical, taking the opportunity to make a technical correction on item number 1 on the vote recorded. It was earlier erroneously recorded as 1 aye vote and 1 abstention vote. Abstention is not part of the process as we vote in our process here in the City Council of Los Angeles. So with that, we'll reopen the vote on item number 1. 1 member being present, Chairman Cardenas, I vote yes. So therefore, with no other members being present, then it will be a recommendation of the chair, is the a communication of the chair of this committee that we support the item. Okay?
Very good.
Thank you very much. With that, is anybody here for general public comment? Seeing and hearing none, general public comment is now closed. This committee is now adjourned.